Hi, and welcome to Reference Checking Isn't a Waste of Time. You're just doing it wrong. I'm Greg Moran. I'm CEO of Check.com. I'm going to discuss today first why we believe that reference checking is not actually a waste of time, and then we're going to talk. Obviously we were joking a little bit in the title about you're just doing it wrong, but the reality is we're all doing it wrong. And we're going to talk about some better ways to take a look at reference checking, some new ways to really look at how to do reference checking right inside your organization. So to get started, there's no question to any experienced hiring manager that the best information on any potential hire is housed in the head of the former colleagues and supervisors. But the challenge is really getting to that information. But it's the pursuit of that data is not a waste of time. It's critical to really help make sure that you're making great hires that will perform and last over the long term in your organization. But there's really getting to that critical information rests on a broken system, unfortunately. Legal concerns have really caused issues with the quality of the information or getting anyone to provide any information at all. The reality is the current phone-based system makes little sense. Just think about the dynamic for a second. A person from your company calls a reference who may have a personal relationship with the candidate to maintain, and then they begin to seek information which could jeopardize that relationship. You're putting the reference on the spot. You're potentially causing a moral dilemma. We teased in the invite about the number one reason for references not completing, but that moral dilemma is the number one reason. Putting the legal concerns aside, just think about it from your own perspective. How quick are you really to throw colleagues and professional relationships under the bus on behalf of somebody you don't know? Typically, any reference wants to help a colleague get the job, not help you screen them out. Now, with all that said, reference checking as a concept isn't broken. The traditional approach doesn't work. References are willing to help you understand job fit, but the approach needs to be right. And we'll discuss more on that later. So let's take a look more closely at some of the legal concerns with reference checking. Now, everyone's afraid of defamation suits resulting from a reference check, right? But here's a quick quiz for you. What does that 2% on the screen represent? A, number of people in this webinar currently in full REM sleep. I hope not, since we just started. B, the number of referees in the World Cup not attempt to eliminate the U.S. immediately. If you're watching a recorded version of this, the World Cup was going on when we recorded. C, the chance the CEO of BP will remain at the company. Again, if you're watching a recorded version of this, hopefully the oil spill has ended by the time you're saying this. Or D, the number of companies targeted by reference-based defamation lawsuits. Of course, the answer is D. According to a 2004 report of the Society of Human Resource Management. And again, those numbers have not risen dramatically over the past few years. The reality, when you talk about legal concerns, this really becomes an issue of perception versus reality. Conventional wisdom says that somehow providing any negative information about a candidate is risky. Today, there's even a school of thought that says even providing positive information is risky. If I say positive things about a former employee in a reference, you hire that person and they fail, you could potentially sue me as a former employer for not disclosing all the information. Now, the reality is, though, that the same standard is applied to reference checking as is applied to newspapers with libel suits. A candidate they don't only have to prove harm, but they've got to prove malicious and dishonest intent as well. And that's a very high bar to jump over. Do your managers need to be honest and not insulting when giving a reference check? Of course. But they can provide the facts of a person's job performance. In fact, actually over 40 states have enacted reference immunity laws on the basis of the business need for exactly this type of information. Now, there is a very real legal risk, though, with reference checking, but it's not defamation. Negligent hiring resulting from not taking all reasonable due diligence steps in the hiring process is a real risk. And if you do get hit with a negligent hiring suit, hopefully you don't, count on losing, as over 72% of employers do. So is there a risk in conducting a reference check? Sure. But consider the risk you take every time a hiring manager walks into an office, shuts the door, and conducts an ill-prepared interview with a candidate. Hiring is risky, but ensuring your hiring process is objective and job relevant, we're going to keep talking about that throughout the webinar, is really, truly your best protection. Now, we said there were really two main problems, right? Legal and quality. In many ways, the legal issues are the big driver causing the quality problems. But managers generally feel that if you do manage to get any information from a reference provider, any of the big issues they want to know about will be glossed over. The reality is they're probably right. Done in the traditional way, we fall right into that moral dilemma about potentially harming a friend or colleague that we talked about before. However, when done right, reference checking is a very strong incremental predictor of job performance. When we talk about incremental predictability, really what we're talking about is this. There are three things you want to know about any job candidate, right? Number one, can they do the job? Do they have the skills and the abilities? Number two, will they do the job? Do they have the disposition to perform in that position and grow in that position and work out well in your culture? And three, have they done it well in the past, and also will that translate to your environment? Let me give you a personal example. I'm very capable of mowing my lawn, but ask my wife and she'll tell you I'm just not willing. We all have things like this that just become forced behaviors. But as managers, what we really want is natural job fit. There's no silver bullet predictor in hiring. There's no one tactic, question, or interview technique that works all the time. But the key is to choose the most predictive from each of those three buckets I just mentioned: the can they, will they, and have they. Now, for you armchair statisticians or industrial psychologists, you've probably heard the term validity coefficient. Basically, this really just refers to how predictive of future performance any element of a screening process is. Decades of research in this field suggest that education and experience are generally less predictive, usually in the 0.1 coefficient area. The closer you get to full 1, the better. Skills tests work well, but they really don't present the whole picture. If you're solely basing a hiring decision on that can they do the job bucket, it's just not very predictive. Yet we do it all the time, particularly in technical related positions. Now, add in item from number 2, the will they do the job bucket, and the picture really becomes clearer. Personality assessments and structured interviews are generally in the 0.3 to 0.4 range. They're both critical elements of a sound hiring process and should absolutely be included. But you still have that have they bucket, right? Structured reference checking, not the traditional phone-based model, but structured reference checking generally produce results in the 0.36 range. They're just as predictive as a personality assessment or a structured interview. Now, layer the best from each of those three buckets, and you have high incremental predictability, and that's really the name of the game to consistently make good hires. Structured reference checking also really excels in a couple other areas as well. First, typical versus maximal performance is one of those areas. Many components of the screening process have difficulty getting past maximal performance. Basically, that just means when a person was at their best. Interviews are a prime example. Ask an unstructured interview question, you get the most memorable answer for when the person truly excelled. But when asked properly, structured reference checking can provide you with typical performance by really comparing specific job performance to other average performers. And that's really what we need to know. Task versus contextual performance is another area. It sounds like a fancy term, but it just means understanding why somebody performs like they do, not just how they performed. For instance, consider a sales rep hire. You ask a typical reference check question like, did they make quota? But is that really all we need to know? As a sales manager, I want to understand why they made or didn't make quota to make sure it's going to translate to my environment. Perhaps you're hiring a sales rep coming out of a hard-driving culture. Yours is a really cooperative and supportive culture. Is the quota question alone still a predictor? No, because this person may not be oriented toward the teamwork that your organization is going to require, and that may cause them to fail in your environment. But reference checking will understand, structured reference checking will understand and really help you understand how this contextual performance will translate into your environment. So that's the end of part 1. If you're watching this online, click on the next video to begin part 2, and we'll talk to you shortly.